What's up, fight fans? This is Anchored Aggression Episode 2. I'm Brett Cagle, joined by Anthony Ballister, and we're going to break down the UFC Fight Night card from last night. Jairzinho Rozenstruik got a win over Shamil Gaziev, earning a TKO. What do you think of last night's main event, Anthony?
I thought it was very, very exciting. I know coming into this, we thought a lot of the fights were going to be lopsided. And basically all the favorites up to that point was basically winning all their fights. So I was actually kind of happy to see, an upset, see an underdog get the win. I was pretty surprised. I guess, it makes sense with, the way that it actually played out. Gaziev really hasn't been in a long fight like that. He's used to, finishing guys in the first and second round. So, I thought he definitely won the first two rounds. He was getting takedowns. But I think, as the fight, went along, I think he kind of gassed out. And I think by the time the third round came, I think, the jab was really getting to him from Rozenstruik. And Rozenstruik's takedown defense really, really impressed me, that second half of the fight. I think Gaziev, he wasn't really moving his head. He was just literally just standing there, taking the shots and taking those jabs. And after a while, I think it added up. And I think that's why, the doctor came in, he was saying, I can't see out of my one eye. And those jabs may not be, a heavy punch, but they add up when they're constantly like that. And I think the doctor made a good stoppage. And, I was really, really impressed with Rozenstruik's takedown defense. And I was definitely disappointed in what Gaziev did.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought Gaziev did well in the first round, and maybe even into the second round. I gave it, one round to Gaziev throughout the fight, but he found a takedown in that first round. And then after that, he didn't really go back to it at all. He had 7 total, but the ease at which he found it in the first, I would have liked to have seen him got on that with a sense of urgency in the second and moving forward. But like you were saying, he was just plodding forward and just eating jabs. The movement of Gaziev, whether it was laterally or his head movement, just wasn't on par with Rozenstruik on the feet, and he couldn't get the fight to the ground in the second half. And he paid for it dearly. I'm looking here at the striking statistics. 140 total strikes landed for Rozenstruik, 27 landed for Gaziev. So the output just really wasn't there for him in this one, and he paid for it. What did you think about the stoppage at the end? Do you think his corner maybe should have thrown the towel in?
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe that's why they were getting into arguments, because I think, in his language, I think he was trying to, relate to them that I can't see out of my one eye. And you could tell he was clearly beat up. Now, he's a big man. He actually was really tough. Most guys would have definitely, went down. But, he was able to just sit there and keep taking those jabs. And he's a big dude, so it's going to take a lot to knock him down. But, every time he's getting that hit, I mean, that's maybe a concussion here, a concussion there. And, after, a few rounds of that, I'm definitely glad they got the stoppage in, because I don't think the fifth round would have went any differently. It would have just been another 5 minutes of him taking those jabs. And, I'm kind of upset if he wanted them to stop and maybe his corner was like, nah, like tough it out. That kind of upsets me. I think maybe that's why the referee came in and was so upset about it and wanted to know what he said. And I'm glad they stepped in, because I think the stoppage was the right thing to do. You don't want to see a guy take any more damage when the fight's not going to go anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a really one-sided fight. How did you have it scored going into the fifth round?
So, I mean, honestly, I did obviously have Gaziev in the first round. I did actually give Gaziev the second round, because I thought he did enough at the beginning of the round to get it. Obviously, Jairzinho Rozenstruik got the third and fourth round. So I thought the fifth round was going to be the winner-take-all. But the way that the fight was heading, Gaziev had nothing left to give. He was completely, out of the gas tank. And Rozenstruik was just going to jab him up more and probably win that fifth round anyway. So honestly, I had a 2-2, but it was most likely heading to 3-2. But I wouldn't, be upset if someone had it the opposite, if someone had it 3-1.
Yeah, absolutely. I had it 3-1. I thought that maybe one of those rounds, the third or the fourth round, it was getting close to where it could have been 10-8. Not that the damage was super bad, but the output just wasn't there from Gaziev. He was coming forward and he was eating 4 shots at a time before he'd even throw one. And it'd take him minutes at a time to land a punch. So, the offensive output, he's going to have to get back into the gym and figure some things out there offensively, I feel like, if he wants to make a push up this heavyweight division.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to say about Gaziev is, first off, I didn't really like his game plan. And I don't know if it's because of the coaches, but I think they knew the obvious. They knew what everybody else did. They knew Rozenstruik had to win the fight on the feet, and they knew Gaziev was going to have to take it to the ground. So I think his whole training camp was take it to the ground. And I think that kind of made him, a little too one-dimensional, because, his takedown attempts weren't even really that great. Everybody saw it coming. It wasn't like he was trying to throw any feints in there. It wasn't like he even had Rosenstrike even thinking about, any strikes or jabs or anything. It was just straight go for the takedown, and I don't think that was a great game plan. You got to mix it up. And I think Rosenstrike did a great job, stopping that. And I definitely think they should have, worked on it a little bit more. And unfortunately for, Gaziev, obviously this was his first, ranked opponent, maybe a little too much too soon, only second fight in the UFC. But the problem is he is a little on the older side, so he kind of has no choice but to be fast-tracked in these fights because he doesn't really have much time to try to move up the rankings and develop because he's only probably got maybe 2-3 years of his prime. So he has to be fast-tracked in the fights like this, unfortunately.
Yeah, and once you break into the ranked division, especially the heavyweight division, there's not a lot of prospects that you can learn in a fight against. You're kind of thrown into the fire there. But I'd have liked to seen better clinch work from Gaziev in that one. Like you were saying, the takedown attempts were kind of sloppy at times. Against Boudier, he was able to get him onto the cage and work the clinch between takedown attempts and strikes. And I thought that was going to be the game plan in this one, but I was surprised there was no clinch work from Gaziev throughout the fight.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised too. And now on the flip side, obviously he's gonna Gaziev's probably gonna have to go, start fighting unranked fighters again, work his way up. But on the flip side for Rosenstrike, honestly, I was watching the post fight and they were asking him like who he would like to see fight next, and I thought they made a great choice. I think he should fight the winner of the fight night in 2 weeks between Taya Tuivasa versus Marcin Tybura. They're saying maybe he could fight the winner of that. And I think that would be a great fight.
Yeah, if Tuivasa can get out of that one, I like Tybura's chances in that one, to be honest with you. But if Tuivasa can get through Marcin, then that would be a great fight between those two guys, two stand-up strikers, and the fans would surely enjoy that one.
Yeah, that would definitely be like where I would head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that matchup too.
So now, we'll go to the co-main event. We had Vitor Petrino versus Tyson Pedro. What were your thoughts on this fight?
Man, coming into this one, we thought it was going to be a really good fight. We had two guys, like Pedro's an explosive striker at times. Petrino's known as a finisher as well. We had high hopes coming into this one, but in my opinion, it didn't live up to expectations. In this one, the output was low again, especially from Petrino in the first and second rounds. I didn't think that this fight should have been remotely close, but Petrino made it close. And that was really because he was backing Pedro into the cage, and then he was eating counter combinations and not throwing much of his own until rounds 2 and 3. You could tell Pedro is one of these veteran fighters that his best days are behind him. He missed 3 years because of injury and, any extended time off, and then coming back against a guy like Petrino who's undefeated and really moving up the rankings, then that's going to be a tough matchup. But I was a little underimpressed by Petrino. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I definitely think it was kind of, lackluster. Definitely not, the co-main event that we thought it would be. Honestly, I think maybe the reason was, I think we said coming in this fight, there was a lot of pressure on Petrino. I think that's why they put him in the co-main event to showcase him, so that, when he does fight a ranked opponent, he's a known name. So what I think is when he came to this fight, I think he, the pressure got to him in the first 2 rounds. So I didn't think he wanted to get finished and he didn't want to, take any risks. So I think he played it safe. I think that's why he didn't see a lot of output in the first 2 rounds. And I think knowing that, I think that's why you saw him come in the 3rd round as dominant as he was. I thought he kind of picked up the pace. And yeah, I had the scorecard, as a unanimous, 30-27. I thought he won every round. But I think he did that intentionally just to keep the first 2 rounds safe because he didn't want to, have the early stoppage and take too much risk because there is a lot of pressure on him. Like we said, he's probably going to be fighting a ranked opponent next. And with the undefeated record, he didn't want to risk that. So I think he played it safe. And then he showcased what he could do in that 3rd and final round.
Yeah, absolutely. I had it 30-27 for Petrino as well. These guys only landed 33 strikes throughout the entire fight, so a little over 10 a round. It wasn't the most entertaining light heavyweight fight that we've ever seen, but hopefully Petrino keeps moving up, the rankings and can get somebody that can give him a legitimate challenge because I think that if he'd had that same mentality against different fighters in the division, it might have been a bad night for him.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm definitely glad, we saw him fight someone like a Tyson Pedro tonight. If it was definitely against one of those top 15 ranked fighters, it probably wouldn't have gone his way. But this could definitely be a learning experience for him. Now he's kind of got the jitters out of him. Now when he does fight a ranked opponent next, maybe he doesn't play it safe and he could go into each round like he did that third round. And he did call Anthony Smith. And honestly, I think I couldn't have come up with a better, matchup for him because, I mean, stylistically, both of them are great strikers. Maybe Anthony Smith maybe a little too much too soon. Maybe he could fight someone a little under that level, maybe like a Dustin Jacoby. But I wouldn't mind Anthony Smith, if he's ready for it. I would be, excited to watch that fight.
Yeah, I'd like that fight with Anthony Smith too. It's just that he's been mentioning retirement, and you don't know if he has one foot out the door. He's got a good job, commentating for the UFC. He's got a good podcast with Michael Bisping that a lot of people watch, and so he's got other avenues that he's putting his time into. So I don't know if that's the greatest fight in the world for Anthony Smith, to be honest with you. But like you said, Jacoby, I like Jacoby. Khalil Rountree's another name I'd like to see. He's an explosive striker and two finishers going at it. I think that would be entertaining. But, yeah, if it was Anthony Smith, I'd like that matchup.
Yeah, and I think, where his progression, I think maybe Khalil Roundtree may be a little too much for him. I think, Roundtree, probably warrants a guy higher up in the rankings. But, yeah, Dustin Jacoby, Anthony Smith, I think that's right around the range we should see, Petrino fighting.
Yeah, I'm just interested to see who they actually give Roundtree to next. He's not the biggest household name, but they do have, like, Alexander Rakic and Prohashka, and some of those guys are in matchups. But he hasn't faced a lot of the top guys in the division, so there could be some interesting matchups for Roundtree. But if they throw him to a guy with potential like Petrino, I also wouldn't be disappointed either.
Yeah, Roundtree's definitely on a nice little win streak. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that wouldn't be too bad. I know Roundtree's a little older, but two upcoming guys in the division. Yeah, I'll be excited for that as well.
Yeah.
So now we transition to I know they're two separate fights, but since they're both in the flyweight division, I say we go one after another. We can start off with the Alex Perez and Muhammad Mokaev fight. What did you think about that one?
I had this one for Mokaev 29-28. I thought at times that Alex Perez did a really good job of defending the takedown. He got into scrambles with Mokaev that we haven't seen him be tested in before. A lot of times it's been one-way traffic, like his fight with Cody Durden. And he's able to either get the fight to the floor or have success on the feet, which leads to a submission. But this was by far the most Mokaev has been tested in his career, in my opinion. And Alex Perez put on a good showing, but Mokaev has a lot of potential, and the judges leaned his way. I had it 29-28 for Mokaev. How'd you have it?
Yeah, I had the same way. I had Mokaev winning round 1 and round 3. I had round 2 for Alex Perez. Mokaev said after the fight, he's not a guy that makes excuses, but he said he came in a fight waking up this morning dealing with some illness. He wasn't feeling too well. But I definitely was a little disappointed. I thought Mokaev was going to dominate the fight a lot more. I think he tried at the beginning to try to show that he could strike a little bit better. It started off well, but then in the second round, it didn't go so well, and Perez was definitely starting to get the best of him. And then obviously in the third round, he was able to take it more to the ground more and start to dominate the third round. So I had him winning the first and third round, Perez winning the second round. But I was definitely, disappointed. Thought he was going to dominate a little bit more. But, if he was sick, then, still winning a 2-1 round win against another ranked fighter being, under the weather is still impressive. But, coming in this fight, we definitely thought it was going to be more one-sided.
Yeah, 20 takedown attempts officially for Mokaev in this one. I don't know if that's a flyweight record, but that's certainly a lot of takedown attempts.
Yeah, and I definitely think, like we said, like if he's going to want to, it does look like he may be, I know we're going to talk about this later about the matchmaking for the division, but, it definitely seems like he may be, thrust into that title shot. And, if he really doesn't want to compete in the division, as we said before, he's going to have to improve that striking. He's going to have to become more all around and not just, completely lean on that ground game.
Yeah, I've actually got an interesting idea for how these next two fights should be paired. I think that they should be matched up against each other. I think that would be a great matchup. I'd love to see Steve Erceg fight Muhammad Mokaev. Both those guys are great on the ground. Erceg showed he has knockout power this weekend, and that was probably the knockout of the night, the finish of the night. There was another flying knee on the prelims that was also great by Oliveira, but Steve Erceg and Muhammad Mokaev is a matchup I really want to see.
Yeah, there's definitely nothing wrong with that. And now that you say it, we transition to, Matt Schnell versus Steve Erceg. Definitely, Steve Erceg was definitely real exciting. Coming in this fight, he had a lot of decision wins. So it was nice to see him get that finish. And yeah, he rocked him and dropped him right away. And it's definitely one of the best knockouts of the night. Like you said, probably second best one of the night besides the one from Oliveira, the prelims. But it was definitely a great statement win for him. I think Usyk showed that his striking and his boxing is definitely top class. That strike that he landed was, flush. It was great. He did call out Moreno. And, after, like I said, after we talk about this, I'll give you my prediction on matchmaking. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight. I do think, that's maybe too high of a ranking for a guy like Usyk, even though Moreno was coming off of 2 losses. Both those losses were very, very close to, Pantoja and Royval. So I don't think, Usyk warrants Moreno yet. But he's definitely, on the come up. And I was definitely very, very impressed with Usyk's striking.
Yeah, absolutely. And how many guys do we see hit like that at 125 pounds? I mean, the power that Steve Usyk has is, that's great for the division, and he's certainly a contender moving forward. But Matt Schnell he's a good guy. He's a good fighter. He's not a great fighter. He's somebody who you can test these up and coming prospects against, and if they beat Schnell, they might be ready. And if they don't beat Schnell, then they're going to have to go back to the drawing board. But Steve Usyk looked fantastic. We talked about it on Friday about how technical he is. I said that I thought he was the most technical fighter in the division. Set it up early with a jab and then went right hand to the body, left hook upstairs. It was beautiful the way he was able to throw that combination and get Matt Schnell out of there.
Yeah, I knew he was a decent striker, but I'm even more impressed with him now than ever before. Now, I'm very, very, respective of his striking. And like you said, he's got to be up there with one of the best strikers in the flyweight division.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if he was to fight, if he was to fight Makayev, Makayev obviously has a way he wants to win the fight on the ground with submissions. Usyk has multiple submissions on his record. We didn't really get to see too much of that ground game this weekend, but I think that would be a great, interesting matchup moving forward. And Usyk right now looks like he has no holes in his game.
Yeah, he's definitely on a very insane fight win streak, 11-fight win streak. That's got to put him up there, for one of the longest win streaks in the UFC. I know not all of them were in the UFC, but some of them have. And, so far, he's been on a crazy win streak, and he definitely warrant, one of those top guys in the division. So now I'm going to, transition to what we think for, the flyweight matchmaking. So these aren't where I think it's going. This is where I think maybe the UFC is heading. So not all these I agree with, but I just think this is where the UFC may be heading. I do think, the UFC is going to want to have Pantoja and Muhammad Makayev fight at UFC 301. Just the way everybody's talking about it, the way, Makayev talked about it at the end of the fight. I just think that's what they're going to throw at us. I think they want to rush him in there. They want a fresh face in the division for the title. So I think that's where we're going to go for the title shot. I think because of that, you still got Abazi out there. You got Royval. So I think they're going to take those two guys, Royval and Abazi, have those guys fight for the number 1 contenders match. And then I think we could see somewhat of a semifinal where I could see, Brandon Moreno versus Matthias Nicolo. Both those guys are coming off losses to Brandon Royval. So it'd be interesting to see those two guys fight. Both of them are kind of in similar spots in their careers. And then the next matchup I would go is Manil Kape versus Steve Usyk. I think both those guys, Manil Kape, what his one loss is to Matthias Nicolo. So he's just outside the top 5. I think, that's exactly where Steve Usyk should be, just outside the top 5. So it's a matchup against probably 2 of the best guys outside the top 5 division. So I would go Kape and Usyk. I would go Moreno and Nicolo. I would go Abazi versus Royval for number 1 contendership. And then I would give the title shot to Pantoja versus Makayev.
I like that Manel Kape versus Steve Usyk matchup a lot, but I do have to ask you, do you think that Muhammad Makayev's performance this weekend warrants him a title shot?
No, honestly, I don't. Honestly, if it was my choice and I had to decide, I would honestly think it should be, Abazi getting the next title shot. I would have Abazi versus Pantoja, and then I would have maybe Royval and Makayev as the number 1 contenders match. Because I think Makayev should get one fight before the title, but unfortunately, I think the UFC is going to rush him into that title shot first.
Yeah, I hope they don't. I really think that'd be a real bad decision for the UFC as far as his career is concerned. He's got a lot of miles left at 23 years old, and I think Pantoja's a bad matchup problem for him. Pantoja's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but also has knockout power in his hands. And, We saw like with Josh Emmett and Bryce Mitchell, when you have the jiu-jitsu guy who can't get the fight to the ground and the other guy has power in his hands, you kind of see what happens. I think Pantoja would probably knock Muhammad Mokaev out. So I'd like to see Muhammad Mokaev again fight. If he's not going to fight Manel Kape or one of these top 5 contenders, have him fight Steve Erceg, the other most talented prospect in the division. Let's see who the cream of the crop is for these bright prospects at 125 pounds. That's kind of my opinion on it, though.
So for the because right now, obviously, Kaka France, he's kind of like the guy left out. So, the 8-9 guys that we're speaking of, Abazi, Royval, Pantoja, Manel Kape, Erceg, I know you said, you would like to see Erceg versus Mokaev. Who do you think should get the next title shot then? You think it should be Albazi?
Albazi. I think Albazi deserves the next title shot. Askar Askarov is somewhere up there. Mateus Nicolau is going to have to. I'd like to see Mateus Nicolau maybe fight Muhammad Mokaev next. I think that would maybe be a good matchup. 2 guys that are both good on the ground, but I think if you throw Mokaev into the title fight right now, it'd be too much too soon, and I think Amir Albazi is more ready for it in his career right now.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing I just don't want to see is, I know Manel Kape has lost to Mateus Nicolau.
Yeah.
So I don't want to see Manel Kape get a title shot before him. I would actually like to see maybe those guys have a rematch. Maybe try to see if Manel Kape can revenge his one loss. And if he does that, then he's definitely going to skyrocket up the number 1 contenders match. So
yeah, there's a lot of great matchups at 125 right now. I know Manel Kape and Kai Kara France got into a heated confrontation at one of the press conferences when Izzy was the main event, and Kape was supposed to fight Kai Kara France and eventually had to fight Felipe Dos Santos because Kara France pulled out of the fight. Those two were kind of heated back and forth, so I wouldn't mind seeing that matchup either. I think that 125 pounds right now is the best that it's ever been for UFC fight fans. There's so many names and people you can hook your wagon to and be a fan of that it's a good time to be a fight fan, especially at 125 pounds.
Yeah, and I know you've been watching the MMA game for a long time. And when was the last time you could sit there and talk about 8, 9, 10 guys in that division that were talking about fighting for either title shots, contenders matches, or one fight away from a contenders match? It's been a long time, if ever.
Long time. And I remember when I was first watching, Demetrius Johnson was the champion, and it was so thinned out that he had just ran through the division and gone through everybody, whether it was Benavidez, whether it was Ray Borg or some of these people, that when Cejudo got signed to the UFC, you're like, oh, we got an Olympic gold medalist. This guy, it might take him a while, but this is going to be the guy that will eventually challenge Demetrius Johnson. Well, when Cejudo first came up, he then got knocked out by Johnson with a knee to the body the first time, and then did eventually dethrone Johnson in the rematch by decision. But it, for a long time, was Demetrius Johnson's division, and no one else really had a chance. So it's good to see a lot of these good and talented fighters moving forward here that all really have championship potential.
Yeah, and I think maybe Demetrius Johnson has a lot to do with that because, all the guys who are fighting now pretty much grew up watching, Demetrius Johnson wipe out the division. So now we got all these guys, trying to emulate their games after him. And now that he's moved on from the UFC, it's pretty much opened up the division like never before.
Yeah, and I actually saw some news online that he might be in a contract dispute with One Championship and might try and get his way back to the UFC. If he comes back and tries to go down to 125 pounds again, how interesting would that be to you as a fight fan?
Oh, that'd be very, very interesting. Now, I know when it comes to the lower weight divisions, age is definitely a factor. Because obviously, the lower the division, the more speed matters. And obviously, the older you get, the slower your reaction speed is. So I'm not sure if he would be able to compete with the top of the division. Obviously, he's definitely going to be, a name to throw in there. And obviously, of course, I'd want to see that. I just don't want to see him come into the UFC and, kind of be like Henry Cejudo, where he comes back and then loses a few fights and not tarnishes his legacy, but, your last memory of him is coming back and losing to a lot of these young guys. So if he's confident and he can come back and maybe compete, if he doesn't win the title, if he can win a couple fights and even fight in a title match and lose, that'd be good enough. I just don't want to see him come in there and just get dominated in 1 or 2 fights, and then that's the last memory we have of the greatest flyweight to ever fight in UFC.
Yeah, I don't think he would. Right now, he's the bantamweight champion over there in One Championship. He just knocked out Marias, and he's fighting guys that are 140, 130 pounds over there. And if he was somehow able to get his body back down to 125, I saw that Cejudo mentioned that he might be wanting to go down to 125 pounds again as well. I think that would be a great matchup if they could somehow get those guys together for a trilogy. That would be something I'd be really interested to see. I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah, and now my last question to you for that is obviously another thing that factors in with age is weight cutting. Weight cutting becomes harder and harder as you get older. And this is probably why we see Demetrius Johnson fighting at 135 and fighting these 140 guys, at his age. Is he going to be able to cut down consistently to 125 2-3 times a year going forward?
Yeah, that's really the question for him and Henry both. If they want to come back to the UFC and chase gold at 125, they're going to have to go through significant weight cuts that they haven't been through in years. So that's going to be an adjustment for their body, and it's going to be a topic of discussion for us moving forward, I'm sure, as Kayla Harrison fights at UFC 300, and she's got to try and make a historic weight cut for herself. So it's definitely harder, like you said, for a fighter getting older, but these are both championship-level competitors that are used to cutting weight their whole life. Like, Cejudo's been cutting weight since he was probably like 8 years old, and then obviously with the Olympics and stuff, that's the highest level of weight cutting that there is. So I think Cejudo, if he really dedicated himself to it, could make it back down to 125, but Johnson would be the bigger question, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's funny you said that. I actually was thinking the opposite. I thought maybe Demetrius Johnson would have the easier weight cut because I feel like Demetrius Johnson's walking around weight maybe a little smaller than Henry Cejudo. I think Cejudo walks around bigger. And, I remember watching the Joe Rogan podcast, and Demetrius Johnson says he only walks around at maybe 140, 145. So he's not one of these crazy weight cutters anyways. So I thought maybe he'd be easier because I feel like Cejudo's maybe walking around at 155, 160 maybe. So I think he would have less weight to cut. But like you said, Cejudo with the wrestling background, he's got, more experience at weight cutting. So he's much better at weight cutting than Demetrius Johnson. But both of them have their questions. But yes, like you said, with the championship mentality in their background, no one would be surprised to see him make those weight cuts at that age.
Yeah, it'd be awesome if they could make it down there because the division, like we were saying, is talent rich. And if they add those two names to it, it would be just off the wall. It might be one of the best divisions in the entire UFC.
Yeah, now speaking of 135, we transitioned to the 135 bout. We had Umar Nurmagomedov against Baghdad Almakhan. I'm not going to lie. Beginning of the fight, I was jumping on my seat when Almakhan ran into that strike. I thought we were about to see the greatest upset in UFC history, but obviously, Umar Nurmagomedov, kept his composure, wasn't rattled, took him straight to the ground, and then basically kind of like overwhelmed him. Every time they were on their feet, though, Almakhan was definitely, landing strikes. And for a guy in his first fight in UFC to, look like that, I wouldn't be surprised to see them give him another ranked fighter. I think he's got a lot of potential in the division because obviously when your first fight is against Umar Nurmagomedov, it's going to be tough. And, it's nearly impossible. But the fact that he even got a knockdown is impressive enough. Umar Nurmagomedov definitely showed great resilience and great promise. And, he's definitely going to be fighting for, contendership soon. He called out Corey Sandhagen after that. We both mentioned on the preview, we would love to see that fight. And, maybe like we said, maybe that could be the number one contenders match going forward, Sandhagen and Omar, because we already have Marab as the next title shot.
Yeah, I'd love to see Umar and Corey Sandhagen for sure. That's a compelling matchup and one that originally got booked in Tennessee last year before Sandhagen had to pull out. So I'm definitely down for that matchup, and I think it's probably the one that needs to be made. But like what you were saying about Almakhan here, he came to win, and that was the most impressive thing to me about his performance is he went out there and really tried to put Umar's lights out, got the first knockdown on Umar in his professional career, and when Umar did that backflip, he kind of like, his eyes were like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that happened. And he was kind of shocked. And then after the fight, they asked him about it, and he said, I didn't even see the punch. I didn't see it coming. So, it was a almost what could have been moment. But I think that that he deserves another fight in the promotion. I think Dana will probably give him one. He didn't look to be physically that strong at 135 pounds. He was really held down for a large portion of the fight. I think that he might be one of these guys with a full training camp and weight cut that could even make 125. But Umar Nurmagomedov is extremely talented on the ground, and there's not many people in the division that can handle his grappling skills. We were talking on the preview show about him and Marab potentially down the line, and I think that would be another great matchup as well.
Yeah. Like we said, honestly, that's probably maybe Marab is probably the only guy in the division that may be favored in a fight right now against Umar Nurmagomedov. And I think that's where we're headed. We got O'Malley and Cheeto. We'll see where that goes. Marab's going to get the next title shot somewhere in September, at the end of the year. And then, I think during that span, you'll have Corey Sandhagen come back from his injury. Him and Umar will fight for #1 contendership. And then who knows, you may be having, beginning of 2025, finally getting Marab versus Umar, which is going to be a great grappling matchup, which will kind of negate itself so we can kind of see what those two guys can do striking each other. But on the flip side for Almacan, I definitely think he obviously warrants, with a full training camp, maybe a guy, just inside the top 15. I wouldn't be mad if he gets a guy just outside the top 15. I was thinking maybe he could fight a guy like Ricky Simone, a guy like right there. I think that's a perfect matchup for him. But I wouldn't be mad if they get a guy just outside the top 15. But, with his age and his record and the way he looked, we're talking the fact that, he was even able to get through the whole round. And I did say it was going to go all 3 rounds. It was going to be a decision win for Umar Nurmagomedov. But the fact that he was able to last 3 rounds with Umar, I definitely think he warrants one of those top 15 guys in the division.
Yeah, I would just like to see him fight a striker next. Ricky Simone, I think, would have a similar game plan to Umar this weekend, try to just take him down at will. But I mean, if he wants to be a contender in the UFC, he's going to have to fight these top level grapplers anyway, like Ricky and Umar. So he's going to have to solve the puzzle at some point. But in his next fight, I'd like to see him fight a striker and see what he's got on the feet, because he looked good when the fight did take place standing in this matchup. So I'd like to see him fight somebody that might be more welcoming of a striking battle.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like you said, if you give him another grappler, pretty similar to what we just saw with, Umar Nurmagomedov, let's give him a guy who could strike, and let's see, how top class his striking really is compared to another guy who could kind of, emulate a similar style as well.
Yeah, that's what I'd be really interested in his next fight for sure.
Now, for the prelims, obviously, I was going to ask, what fight stood out to you, but obviously, we said both coming into this, we both want to see, Bahash Sharat fight, and we were real excited to see him fight. And what were your thoughts on that fight?
Well, he lost as a 6.5 to 1 favorite. But we did mention that Zahabi's brother does train great fighters at TriStar. He's the former trainer of George St. Pierre and Rory McDonald, Firas Zahabi. Now, Almin Zahabi took a couple years off from the sport in 2019, came back, put some wins together. He is a very technical striker, and we saw it in this matchup. He was able to land a jab against Basharat, who in the first round I gave it to Basharat. I thought this was a close fight, to be honest with you. I gave the first round to Basharat. He was able to find takedowns there, and I thought that his arms might have gassed as the fight went on because he was going for so many takedowns and not getting them in the second and third rounds that it was hard for him to put the volume on Zahabi that he did in the first. But in the first round, I thought Basharat looked good. I gave him the first round, and then from there on, Zahabi really turned the course of the fight. I saw the live odds to start the second round were minus 1,600 for Basharat, which is just huge, 16 to 1. So it was the biggest win of Zahabi's career. He took the undefeated record away from Javad Basharat, and it was just an impressive performance from the Canadian.
Yeah, I saw the fight going the same way. I thought Basharat looked great. The first round was exactly how I thought it was going to go. I loved the way his style was. He was landing some great kicks. He had kind of like a karate type style with the way he was throwing his kicks, and they were landing. He was looking great. But when the second round came, Zahabi started to land those punches, and I think Basharat was leaving himself wide open to take those shots. And I think when the second and third round went along, I think those shots started to add up. I definitely thought Basharat won round 1. I think Zahabi definitely won round 2. Now round 3, I thought was pretty close. I thought it was a little bit more back and forth. But at the end of the day, I thought Zahabi did more damage, and I definitely thought they gave the fight to the right person. I thought Zahabi won round 2 and 3. And he looked really, really good. And he's definitely a guy that's going to have to fight maybe not a ranked guy, but he's going to have to fight someone upper in the division as well. And Basharat's going to have to learn from this and start to develop a little bit more. And maybe it was a little too much too soon for him. But again, that's not taking anything away from Zahabi because Zahabi came ready to fight. And, I came away more impressed with him than I was disappointed with, Basharat.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought Basharat put together a decent performance, but the guy he was fighting, listen, in every other sport, the term gatekeeper is a bad, connotation to it. But there really are great fighters in the UFC that test these young athletes and give them losses before they go on to do great things. We were talking on the preview show about Zaleski dos Santos beating Sean Strickland, and then Sean Strickland moving up and winning a title. So this stuff happens all the time. You don't really know how it's going to affect the career of Basharat, but I think this is definitely a learning experience for him that he'll get better through.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And he was pretty upset. You could tell by his reaction. He thought he won the fight. He probably thought he won round 3. But yeah, he's still young. He's still got time. And, maybe now, sometimes, having that first loss can be the best thing because having that pressure of always having that undefeated, kind of, becomes overwhelming to the point where you're more focused on having that one loss than you are trying to win the fight. And I remember, Sean Brady was talking about that in the Rogan podcast that, when he fought Bilal, he was so worried about that one loss that he wasn't really able to focus on just that, opponent. So I think, maybe this could be a blessing in disguise for Basharat. Go back, fight a guy less, ranked, and then maybe, fight another guy at that same level in another fight, maybe in 2025. But he's got time to develop. But yeah, like I said, Zahabi, I was very, very impressed with him. And, he's got a little, decent, win here, decent win streak. And, I would like to see him fight a guy maybe just inside the rankings or just outside the rankings.
Yeah, same. So would I. As I said, I thought it was Zahabi's best win of his entire career. And, he's trains at one of the best gyms in the world with his brother, close-knit, family atmosphere there. So he's got one of the best camps in the world. And he's older in his career. I don't think he's going to make a legitimate push for the title, but he could put on some fun fights for sure.
Yeah, at his age, you can't put obviously a push for the title, but he could definitely maybe put a push to maybe get in that top 15 before the end of his career. And, we were just talking about another great striker, at 135. So how would you feel if we could have like Zahabi, like you said, as a gatekeeper? What about him fighting a guy like Almacan at 135?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I pulled that one earlier with the flyweights, but that'd be a good matchup too, having those guys fight. Both of them are decent strikers. I think that Zahabi's probably more technical and longer in reach. I think he'd probably utilize that jab a lot like he did this weekend. But, Bazkat looked really explosive in his debut against Umar. So I'd like to see what he has. And I think Zahabi'd be a good opponent for him.
Yeah, I agree. And the one last thing that, stood out to me in the prelims is obviously, maybe not only the knockout of the night, but maybe the knockout of the year from Vicinius Oliveira. That was an insane fight. He definitely, I thought, lost round 1. And then even in the beginning of round 2, he was giving up his back. He was getting destroyed in the ground game. And then all of a sudden he made a quick turn, got on top of him, and pretty much he was, destroying him with the jabs and kicks all night. And then, he kind of had him run on his back foot. And he just charged at him with that flying knee, and that knockout was unbelievable. And it's definitely going to be one of the top knockouts of the year. And, Vicinius Oliveira, he's on a decent win streak as well. And he was telling, Michael Bisping before the fight, obviously, he's got 3 losses on his career. But now, with where he's at in his development, he feels like he's invincible. And he feels like, he's one of these ranked fighters coming up.
Yeah, and I think he does. He looks huge for that weight class. And I did feel bad for Sopaj in this one because he's 23 years old, coming in on less than a week's notice, close to a week's notice. And, for that to happen, I thought he won the first round. He put together a good performance. He came to win as well, like Bazkat did on the main card. And, Oliveira, he leaves his chin open. What I saw in the first round was that Sopaj came in and was looking to land overhand rights and really get him out of there. He wanted to make him pay for the pre-fight gestures that Oliveira was giving him at weigh-ins and that sort of thing. And he tried to get him out of there, couldn't do it, and it looked to me like he tired as the fight went on, and that's when Oliveira really took over. But in his last 2 fights, Oliveira has dominant knockout wins. They're highlight reel knockouts. So he's a very entertaining fighter moving forward, and someone that I agree needs to step up in competition.
Yeah, yeah, you're definitely right. He's definitely got to be one of the biggest, bantamweights, in the division.
Mhm.
He's about 5'9", and he looks like he's walking around at about like 170.
Yeah.
So he's kind of got like Aljamain Sterling. He was a very big guy for that division, but he was only about 5'7". This guy's about 5'9". So this guy's definitely, he basically should be fighting at 145. The only thing that scares me though was him having such a crazy weight cut when he starts fighting these guys in the top of the division. Is his cardio going to be able to, hold up? Because when you're cutting that much weight, obviously your cardio is going to suffer as well, and your speed's going to suffer as well. So when he starts fighting the top of the division, just hopefully that insane weight cut doesn't come back to haunt him. But if he can keep his cardio up, not let that weight cut affect him, and he could make 135, he's going to be a tough guy for anybody at that weight class to deal with, especially with the way he strikes. He's definitely going to be an exciting guy to watch in that division.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that stuck out to me though was Sopaj also landed 3 of 4 takedowns and had 4 minutes of control time. Largely, these first 2 fights of Oliveira's career in the UFC have been stand-up wars back and forth, and he's won them both by knockout. But going forward, I'd like to see him defend takedowns at a higher clip, especially against a debuting fighter who has a striking base as well. He was taken down 3 times by that guy. So, if he catches a grappler moving forward and is getting controlled on the ground and loses by decision or something, I wouldn't be thoroughly shocked either.
Yeah, me neither. And now, I just got one more question before we get out of here. Do you have any more final thoughts on the card, or any fights or fighters that we didn't get to speak on yet?
Do you want to do a card rating, like what we give the card 1 out of 10?
Yeah, you can go first.
I'll give it. So I thought this card could have been really great. The main event was fine. The co-main event let me down a little bit, like we were talking about with Petrino and Pedro. I thought both those guys are really explosive strikers and could have put on the third round for Petrino was great, but the first 2 rounds were a little slow getting started. Umar was tested in ways we didn't think he was going to get tested. We had a good fight with Zahabi and Basharat. I'll give the card like a 7.2, like a 7.2.
Yeah, I was thinking like I was going to give it about 6.9, 6.8, because I was definitely thinking most of these fights were going to be one-sided. But with the Rosen strike and Ghazi fight, that kind of made it a better card for me. Definitely, the co-main event was the disappointing one. So the combination of the main event being more exciting and the co-main event being less exciting, it kind of cancels each other out. So I give it probably about a 6.8. Obviously, the Omar fight, the Magomedov fight with Almakhan was much closer than we thought. Basharat and Zahabi was definitely the fight of the night for me. That fight was definitely a great fight. The Flying Knee definitely gave it a good rating, so I'm going to give it a 6.8. But I can't wait for us to talk on Wednesday for UFC 299. I mean, that's got to be maybe one of the deepest and best cards that I've ever seen in my lifetime. And that fight card goes about 12 fights deep. So we're going to have a lot to talk about on Wednesday.
Yeah, we're going to have a big prediction show. And I was going to say that Eric Anders and Jamie Pickett fight didn't really add to the whole card's rating too much either, because that fight to me wasn't very impressive kind of at all.
Yeah, if I had to pick one fight that was definitely the snooze fest of the fight, it was definitely that one.
Yeah, for sure. So at UFC 299 coming up next weekend, which fight are you most excited to see? I know we talked about this on the preview show. It didn't really go up on YouTube. So which fight on UFC 299 are you most interested in?
Well, definitely the one I'm most excited about is definitely Benoit Saint Denis fighting Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier's been one of the top guys in the division, but now they see an upcomer like Saint Denis. I think it's going to be very exciting. I honestly think he's going to shock the world and get the knockout win. And I think he's going to be one of those guys at the end of this card. Everybody's going to be talking about him. He's going to be talking about as one of the more upcomers, and probably maybe the next guy for Islam. Islam wants fresh blood. He wants a new contender. And what a better way to go out, knock out Dustin Poirier, get ranked in the top 5, and, establish himself as a contender for Islam. And then one other fighter I want to see is I'm real excited to see Michael Venom Page see him make his finally his UFC debut, something that we've been waiting years and years to finally see.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as the Benoit Saint Denis fight's concerned, I don't see how that can't be an entertaining fight for the BMF title. Two finishers. This is going to be an absolute war that fight fans won't want to miss. Like you were saying, Anthony. And then for me, I really want to see. I'm interested in Michael Venom Page versus Kevin Holland. I think that that's going to be a very interesting stylistic matchup between two guys who are long and lengthy and have a lot of the same similar skill sets. I'm really interested in that one, but I'm really intrigued by Robles de Spain making his debut on the prelims, the 6'7" Taekwondo bronze medalist in the Olympics. He finished 5 fights in a combined total fight time of 19 seconds on the regional scene. 5-0, undefeated, all knockouts, all under 10 seconds. This guy is just going to be a finisher in the heavyweight division. I can't wait to see what he's got when he debuts against Josh Parisian.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, we could go all day talking about this card because there's about 12 or 13 fights that we're going to want to speak about. So I can't wait for Wednesday, and I can't wait to, give our predictions, break down this unbelievable card, once-in-a-generational type card, and I can't wait to bring it to Phantom Sports fans around the world.
Yep. Thanks for joining us, fight fans. We'll catch you on Wednesday night.
See ya.
See ya.